Good morning. Thank you very much for the introduction. So as you already know, my name is Nicola Barke. I also go by the name of the Burmese Python, which is a fight name. So let me start with that. As Paige so rightly said, I hold 2 full-time careers. I'm a professional boxer and 2-sport world champion by night, and by day I have a full-time job for HSBC as their global project manager. And so when I tell people this, there's often 2 responses they first have. First, they can't believe that I box because they see me in a dress, in heels, and can't put 2 and 2 together. And second, they say, oh, combat sports is really brutal, really aggressive, and pretty raw. But what people don't see is everything I've learned in the past 15 years through doing 5 different combat sports and everything that lies beneath the surface. And that's why I've decided to call my talk Not Just Fists, because sport in general doesn't just teach you the skill, it teaches you to be a leader, it gives you an identity, it teaches you business acumen, and it's more than that physical strength that you see on game day. You see how we have to work hard behind the scenes to secure sponsorships, to build brand visibility. And so, what I'd really like to share with you today is to take you on my journey through martial arts and to share 3 important key lessons that I've learned through my journey that have not only just transformed my life, but my career, and allow me to go and deliver international keynote talks and really hopefully inspire and motivate audiences to fulfill their full potential. And this might be hard to imagine, but there was once a time I was this little girl, and I was the most shy, timid little girl who didn't have a voice, couldn't speak up for herself, and didn't have any courage. And so the first lesson, I got a bit trigger happy, but the first lesson that sports has taught me is that growth is uncomfortable. And I learned that the really hard way when I became the first UK female to ever compete in a sport called Lethwei, which is a Burmese martial art, colloquially known as the art of 9 limbs, that allows punches, kicks, knees, elbows, headbutts, you heard that right, all with no gloves. And so if I just help bring it to life a little bit, these are a couple of action shots. But I really remember being in the UK, watching the men fight under this rule set, thinking, ironically, that they were quite cagey when they were fighting each other and they looked really nervous. Flash forward a year, I was in the changing rooms over in Burma, about to walk out for this Lethwei bare-knuckle boxing fight. And I've never had a street fight, I've never punched anyone without gloves, and this is what I was about to walk out and do. And the amount of fear that was filled within me, I was so close to not walking out. But there was this little voice in my head that just said, on the other side of fear is everything you ever wanted. And that saying never really held any weight for me until I walked out and competed under Lethwei. And to this day, I still don't know if I was happier that I'd won the fight or just elated I didn't die because the stakes genuinely felt like they were that high. But the reason I share this story is because for a lot of women in sport, you have to be the first to pave the way. And growth is uncomfortable, and it's messy, and it's rarely glamorous, but it's our duty to really pave the way so that others and younger female athletes coming through have the opportunities that we didn't have. And so growth is really important. The second one is probably one of my favorite. It's that resilience is built and not born. Because when people hear my highlight reel, they immediately look at it and think that I have absolutely everything together. They see that I competed in the Royal National Ballet for 14 years, that I then, at the late age of 17, started Taekwondo and 3 years later won a world title. They hear that I studied biomedical sciences and graduated with the first-class honours degree. They hear that I then went to switch to professional kickboxing and became British #1 and UK #1. They then hear that I learnt a completely different martial art and became not only the first UK female to compete in Lethwei, but then went on to win a world title. Oh, thank you. But they also see that I'm now an undefeated professional boxer, and for any martial art fans, I'm signed to the UK's top boxing promoter, Frank Warren. And that whilst doing all of that, I work full-time for HSBC, leading over 300 staff. But what's more important is everything that you don't see, because we're really stuck in this world where we think success is linear, but actually there's so many challenges, failures, and setbacks. And so you don't see that I was born with narcolepsy, which is a sleeping disorder, where your brain just immediately switches off, and I could be standing here one moment and I could be out for hours. And that I really struggled at university and the whole way through school. No one sees that after being signed to the boxing promoter Frank Warren, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. No one sees that I suffered with really bad mental health after being in a life-threatening car crash and had to navigate that. No one sees the broken ribs for winning the world title. That I had countless knee injuries, that I was in a wheelchair, that, as you could probably guess, I've had my nose broken quite a few times, that I was dropped from the Olympic Taekwondo team because I was too liable to injury, that I was KO'd in my very first kickboxing fight, and for a long time, because martial arts in general isn't seen as a female sport, a lot of my family didn't support me. And so that was all the challenges, setbacks, and failures. And that's not even taking into account the fact that I had to balance a full-time job with my professional career. And that's not even to mention the fact that when you're trying to build yourself as a professional athlete, that you need to do your own marketing, you need to try and reach out for sponsorships, you need to build your own brand. There's so many things that go into that. And so I often ask, if you knew that all of this was the price for success, to follow your dream, would you still do it? Because for me, combat sports has not just taught me to be a leader, to step into the uncomfortable, but it's taught me to be really resilient. And it wasn't something that I was magically born with. It's through every setback, one step at a time. You get punched, you learn. You fall, you rise. But the people that really differentiate in terms of being successful are the ones that still choose to turn up anyway. And the final lesson, I feel like a teacher when I say that, but the final lesson is know your worth. And this is a mix in terms of from the fighters that I train with, from my coaches, but this motto in particular is from my mother, because my mum was born over in Burma. At the age of 13, she came over to the UK. A couple of years later, her father passed away, and she was responsible for looking after her and her 7 siblings. And so she bought herself a typewriter, because that was the back in the day, before computers, and she worked really hard up the ranks with no hand-me-outs, no qualifications, and successfully retired, heading up HR for a private equity firm. And the reason I share this is because my mother didn't have any hand-me-outs, she didn't have any help, she didn't have any roadmap, but what she did have in abundance was self-belief. She knew her worth, and she knew what she brought to the table, and that's something that combat sports has really helped me do too. I love the way she came home to celebrate and normalize how she'd asked for a salary increase, how she challenged effectively, and that she was always able to use her voice. because it taught that little girl that I once was that I could speak up and stand up for myself, even if the outcome didn't change. And so that's a really important lesson that sports has given me, because it gave me that confidence. And the reason I share all of this is because, yes, to be a female in sport, you need to be resilient, but at the same time, you also need to know your worth. Because if you don't know your worth, then how can you expect anyone else to? And it's really important, and it matters, because a lot of the time people say, boxing's really brutal, and it is brutal. But what's more brutal is telling a little girl to follow her dreams as a professional athlete and then not giving her any tools, support, visibility, or structure to do it. And that's why events like this are really important, to help have really good conversations, to help bring it to the top, and to pave the way for others. And just as I wrap this up, I shared that I've had a recent diagnosis of a brain tumor, and so a lot of the work that I've done has pivoted from being in the ring and chasing medals to actually stepping into something a bit more meaningful, and being able to talk at events like this here in the UK and internationally, to really share that it's not just about motivation that we need to be talking about, it's that transformation. And that doesn't always have to be in sport. That's about everyone who's involved in sport, and not just the athlete themselves. And so really working to help build resilience and reignite that passion and excitement. Because if there's two things I've learned, it's that, one, you don't need to feel fear to be in a fight. Two, that you don't need to be getting into a fight to be a leader, but actually you do really need to be brave enough to grow, you need to be brave enough to step into change, and you need to be brave enough to lead change. Thank you all. I hope we have a really great day.